Booker for holding this hearing. Thank you all for testifying. And Mr. Carbone, I couldn't agree more. It's a staggering conflict of interest, self-dealing. I wrote down the 3 words that Blanche used to describe that IRS sham of a settlement. I think he said regular, typical, and I can't remember the third, but they were anything but accurate descriptors of that unique agreement, which, as the judge in Florida pointed out, has relief for people who are not even parties to the litigation, to the degree there was any litigation, with remedies that have nothing to do with the alleged offense, and uses such broad terms as to be really totally in the eye of the beholder. And I think Senator Cornyn was right. It was also quite striking that Blanche attributed to himself the power to speak for people on both sides of that agreement by saying that it was dead. How could he speak for the other side of that agreement? Well, because he was on both sides of the deal. But I want to start by asking Mr. Carr a question. I asked Mr. Blanche about his recusal, his supposed recusal. I asked him if he talked to Mr. Terrell. He acknowledged that he did. I asked him if he was advised by Mr. Terrell. Did Mr. Terrell tell you that ethics laws and policies required that you not be involved in cases involving your prior representation of the president? His answer was yes. So in those 3 matters, the hush money payment case, January 6th case, Mar-a-Lago case, you were to recuse yourself. His answer was, I'm recused, correct? Well, by the way, he said the cases are not ongoing, Senator, yes. But to the extent there's any work around those cases, yes, I'm recused. So then I brought up, and you must have watched the hearing, so you said to CPAC a couple months ago, the other things that are happening, there was not a single man or woman at the Department of Justice who had anything to do with those prosecutions, meaning the prosecution of the president. Now, you had something to do with those prosecutions, right?
I was a spokesman for the office.
For the Office of the Special Counsel.
Correct.
That was leading both of those investigations into Mar-a-Lago, the classified documents and obstruction case, as well as the January 6th case.
Correct.
So by his by what he described to CPAC, you were included among those not left standing as a result of those firings. So I asked him, so you're saying that it's not a conflict of interest for you to be involved in the firing of prosecutors who prosecuted your client, your former client. There's no conflict there. Is that your, and his answer was no, there is. They said there is a conflict of interest. I wasn't involved. That would be a conflict of interest. But he fired you, right?
He signed my termination notice, yes.
He signed your termination notice. So he signed the termination of someone who worked on the prosecution of his former client and arguably his current client, Donald Trump.
Correct.
I mean, it seems to me that was a pretty direct lie he told to our committee. Now, maybe he would quarrel with describing you as a prosecutor, but he wasn't quibbling over that when he was speaking to CPAC. He said no one involved in those cases is still remaining at the department. And when I asked him about taking credit for that, he said, no, that was just a statement I made.
What happened here could be a major problem for Todd Blanche. Adam Schiff wasn't just asking tough questions. He was trying to highlight what he believes is a serious contradiction between Blanche's testimony and his actions. Earlier in the hearing, Blanche acknowledged that ethics rules required him to stay away from matters involving his former client, Donald Trump. He stated that he was recused from those cases. Then Schiff focused on a detail he believes undermines that claim. According to Schiff, Blanche's signature appeared on the termination notice of an official connected to the Trump investigations. That immediately raises a question. If Blanche was recused, why was his name attached to the document? Schiff's case is built on Blanche's own statements and the paperwork itself. He isn't introducing a new allegation here. He's arguing that the facts already on the record don't seem to fit together. Supporters of Blanche would likely respond that signing a document doesn't necessarily mean directing or personally making the decision. They may argue that administrative actions often involve multiple levels of approval, but Schiff clearly sees it differently. From his perspective, the issue isn't the document alone. It's whether the actions taken are consistent with the recusal Blanche described to the committee. That's why this exchange stands out. The discussion quickly moves beyond legal procedure and turns into a question of credibility. Schiff is essentially arguing that the committee deserves a clearer explanation of how those decisions were handled. Whether viewers agree with Schiff or Blanche, one thing is clear. This line of questioning put the spotlight directly on Blanche's role and created one of the most tense moments of the hearing. And as the hearing continued, Schiff wasn't ready to move on. He pressed further, raising even more questions about who was involved, what decisions were made, and whether the full story had been told. But Schiff wasn't done yet. After challenging Blanche's explanation, he pushed even harder, raising new questions about who was really involved in these decisions and whether the public was getting the full story. Take a look at what happened next.
Justice is currently doing.
I completely agree. Mr. Carr, if I could just return to you for a moment. He signed your termination. Are you aware of whether he signed any terminations involving any of the other members of Jack Smith's team?
I don't know. I did reach out to a few of them. Some of them were fired before he became a deputy attorney general. Others were fired after. So I don't know. I will say...
I would be very interested if any of your colleagues share with you. I think we would all be interested to know whether you're not the only one that he fired on the on the Smith team, or in any of the investigations that he is supposedly recused from. Mr. Carbone, I asked Mr. Blanche a question at the end of the hearing. It was kind of interesting because most of the fact-based questions I asked him, he dodged. The one more or less rhetorical question he really seemed determined to answer, which is, what happened to you? What happened to the Todd Blanche of the Southern District of New York, who was a respected prosecutor? You knew him, you worked with him. I understand from others in your old office that he was held in high regard. What do you think happened?
This wasn't just a tense exchange. It was a moment that cut straight to the heart of Todd Blanche's credibility. Earlier in the hearing, Blanche told senators that he was recused from matters involving his former client, Donald Trump. The message was simple. He wasn't involved in those cases. Then Adam Schiff introduced a detail that immediately changed the conversation. A termination notice connected to a member of Jack Smith's team reportedly carried Blanche's signature. And that's where the problem begins. Because for many Americans watching this hearing, the question isn't complicated. If you're truly keeping your distance from an investigation, why does your name appear on actions affecting people connected to it? That's the question Schiff wanted everyone to focus on. Not legal jargon, not bureaucratic explanations, just that simple contradiction. And once that contradiction entered the room, the hearing became about something much bigger than a personnel decision. It became about trust, because trust is the foundation of every public institution. The moment people start wondering whether an official's actions match their testimony, every statement they make comes under scrutiny. Every explanation is questioned. Every decision is re-examined. That's exactly what happened here. But then Schiff delivered what may have been the most devastating line of the entire hearing. What happened to you? Think about that for a second. He didn't ask Blanche about a document. He didn't ask about policy. He didn't ask about procedure. He asked about the man himself. Schiff was speaking to the former federal prosecutor who once built a reputation for enforcing the law, not the political appointee sitting before the committee. And that question carried a clear message. Schiff wasn't merely challenging Blanche's explanation. He was challenging his transformation. He was asking whether the principles that once defined Blanche have been replaced by political loyalty. Now, Blanche's defenders will argue that signing a termination notice doesn't necessarily mean he participated in an investigation. They'll say administrative responsibilities and legal recusals are separate matters. That's a reasonable argument. But Schiff's point wasn't really about paperwork. It was about perception, because public confidence doesn't depend only on what officials do.
Interesting. And I mentioned this at the hearing, I don't think people change that much. I suspect it's more that we don't really know who they are until they show themselves, until they are forced to make a difficult decision between their ambition and their principles. And we've seen this. He's not alone in this. We've seen this from so many people who work in this building or the administration who come to Congress or come to the administration as one person and seemingly transmogrify into something completely different. And I suspect that character flaw was there all along. They just never were forced to make the choices that reveal who they really are. The last question, Ms. Stein, and thank you so much for being here. I was struck by the completely anomalous behavior of Mr. Blanche going to interview one of the co-conspirators, the primary co-conspirator of Jeffrey Epstein, Maxwell. The fact that he seemed to take no one who really knew the facts of the case, which no self-respecting prosecutor would do, that he didn't challenge any of her many misrepresentations, and that magically she ended up in this prison camp afterwards, unsuited for a sex predator like her. How did victims feel watching that spectacle, that charade? What was that like?
Very difficult for us, as it would be very difficult for any victim of crime. Ghislaine Maxwell has shown herself to perjure herself in civil litigation, and it really wasn't lost on us that Mr. Blanche spent 9 hours, 2 days interviewing her, but for months and months and months, we couldn't get in front of the Department of Justice. And when we did, we had about an hour with Mr. Blanche, which was nothing in comparison. Maxwell's move to a low-security facility is unprecedented for anyone with a conviction that she holds. I mean, it's just unheard of. We are further concerned because this administration has not ruled out a pardon. This woman was convicted of sex trafficking, and she's been given preferential treatment over and over and over again, and that just begs us to ask, why?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senator Durbin, for your indulgence in allowing me to go ahead.
What makes this exchange so significant isn't just what was said, it's what it reveals about the growing controversy surrounding the Epstein case and Ghislaine Maxwell. Senator Adam Schiff wasn't simply criticizing Todd Blanche for meeting with Maxwell. He was questioning the process itself. According to Schiff, Blanche reportedly spent hours interviewing a convicted Epstein associate, while victims struggled to get meaningful access to Justice Department officials. And that's the issue many people find troubling. Imagine being one of the victims. For years, you've fought to have your voice heard. Then you learn that a senior Justice Department official reportedly spent 2 days speaking with Maxwell, while victims received far less time. From their perspective, it can appear that the convicted offender is receiving more attention than those harmed by the crimes. Diana's testimony pushed that concern even further. She argued that Maxwell has repeatedly received preferential treatment, pointing to her transfer to a lower security facility and raising concerns about the possibility of a future pardon. Whether people agree with those claims or not, the perception problem is clear. Justice should not only be done, it should be seen to be done. That's why this debate has become so controversial. The central question isn't whether officials should interview Maxwell. Critics argue that if that much time is devoted to hearing from Maxwell, victims should receive the same level of attention and consideration. At its core, this isn't just about Ghislaine Maxwell. It's about priorities, public trust, and whether victims feel the system is working for them. When victims say they received only a fraction of the access reportedly given to Maxwell, many Americans naturally ask, who is the system listening to? That's why this exchange attracted so much attention. It wasn't just emotional testimony, it was a direct challenge to the Justice Department's handling of one of the most controversial cases in modern American history. If you found this discussion interesting, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more political news and analysis.